I stood in the sterile corporate security office of Henderson Industries, watching Security Chief Bradley Morrison demand my badge and access cards. 3 years of exemplary service as a cybersecurity analyst, and they were terminating me without explanation. My hands remained steady as I placed the items on his desk. "Turn it over," he commanded, flipping my employee badge to inspect the back. His face drained of all color as he discovered a silver sticker reading, "DOJ Asset, Do Not Detain." The room fell completely silent. Morrison's eyes widened in horror as the realization hit him like a freight train. He had just fired a federal undercover operative. The investigation that led to this moment began 18 months earlier in a nondescript government building in downtown Washington. I remember sitting across from DOJ Special Agent Patricia Wells, her steel-gray eyes studying my military intelligence file with the intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. "Kylie Morrison, formerly Staff Sergeant Morrison, United States Army Intelligence," she had said, reading from my dossier. 4 years of exemplary service, expert-level cybersecurity credentials, and a clean psychological evaluation. You're exactly what we need for this operation. Agent Wells slid a thick manila folder across the conference table. Inside were financial documents, corporate organizational charts, and surveillance photographs of Henderson Industries' executive team. The company specialized in manufacturing advanced communications equipment for the Department of Defense, securing contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually. "We have reason to believe Henderson Industries is systematically defrauding the government," Wells explained, her voice carrying the weight of serious federal crimes. "Our preliminary investigation suggests they're overcharging on defense contracts by as much as $40 million. We need someone on the inside to gather concrete evidence." My background made me the perfect candidate for infiltration. After completing my military service, I had earned advanced certifications in network security and digital forensics. My cover story was simple yet believable. A recent divorce had left me needing stable employment, and I was genuinely passionate about cybersecurity work. Henderson Industries hired me 6 weeks later as a mid-level cybersecurity analyst. The company's sprawling campus in Northern Virginia housed over 800 employees across multiple divisions. My official responsibilities included monitoring network traffic, implementing security protocols, and ensuring compliance with federal data protection standards. During my first months at Henderson, I carefully built relationships with key personnel. James Thornton, the IT director, was a 20-year company veteran who took pride in mentoring new technical staff. Sarah Fletcher, the finance manager, was a detail-oriented professional who often worked late reviewing budget allocations and contract specifications. Both James and Sarah became genuine friends, which created an unexpected emotional complication. They were hardworking, honest employees who had no knowledge of the criminal activities occurring in the executive suites above them. Every shared lunch conversation and friendly office interaction reminded me that my investigation would potentially destroy the livelihoods of innocent people. The fraud investigation required meticulous documentation. I used sophisticated recording devices disguised as common office supplies, capturing conversations with executives who casually discussed inflated billing practices. Hidden cameras in my laptop bag recorded confidential documents during after-hours access to restricted areas. My encrypted file transfers to DOJ handlers occurred during routine network maintenance windows, when unusual data traffic would be less noticeable. Agent Wells had trained me to communicate through coded emails that appeared to be personal correspondence with fictional family members. The first major breakthrough came when I gained access to Henderson's internal financial systems. The billing software contained 2 separate sets of records, one showing actual manufacturing costs, and another displaying inflated figures submitted to government procurement offices. The discrepancies were staggering, with some items marked up by 300% above their true production costs. CFO Margaret Cross had developed an intricate system for hiding the fraudulent charges within legitimate expense categories. Equipment that cost $50 to manufacture was billed to the Pentagon at $250, with the excess profits funneled into executive bonuses and unauthorized research projects. As weeks turned into months, I documented dozens of fraudulent transactions. Defense Department purchase orders were systematically manipulated to inflate quantities and upgrade specifications without corresponding increases in actual deliverables. Henderson Industries was stealing taxpayer money on an industrial scale. CEO Richard Henderson's paranoia about federal oversight grew more pronounced as congressional budget committees began asking pointed questions about defense contractor spending. He implemented new security measures, including mandatory polygraph tests for employees with access to sensitive financial data. The pressure of maintaining my cover while conducting a federal investigation created constant stress. I had to perform my legitimate job duties flawlessly while secretly gathering evidence that could send my colleagues' bosses to federal prison. Every friendly conversation with James or Sarah felt like a betrayal, knowing that my real purpose was to bring down their company. My cover story about a difficult divorce provided a convenient explanation for my occasional mood swings and distracted behavior. Colleagues sympathized with my fictional personal struggles, offering emotional support that made my deception even more painful. The complexity of Henderson's fraud scheme became clearer as I gained deeper access to their systems. The company had been overcharging the government for nearly 5 years, with total fraudulent billings approaching $40 million. Every falsified invoice represented resources stolen from military families and veterans programs. 3 months into my assignment, I discovered something far worse than financial fraud. Working late in Henderson's secure server room, I accessed restricted databases containing quality control reports and equipment testing data. What I found made my blood run cold. Henderson Industries wasn't just overcharging the government for communications equipment. They were knowingly shipping defective products to military units deployed in combat zones. Internal testing reports showed that their tactical radio systems had a 40% failure rate under field conditions. Yet the company was claiming 98% reliability in their government submissions. The falsified quality control documents told a horrifying story. Engineer reports detailing critical component failures had been systematically altered or destroyed. Warning memos from production managers about substandard materials were buried in executive files marked "Do Not Distribute." The company was selling equipment they knew could fail when soldiers needed it most. My hands trembled as I photographed page after page of damning evidence. Each document represented a potential death sentence for American service members who would depend on this faulty equipment during life-threatening situations. The magnitude of Henderson's criminal negligence was breathtaking in its callousness. Further investigation revealed the true scope of the tragedy. Cross-referencing military casualty reports with Henderson equipment deployment records, I identified 3 soldiers who had died in Afghanistan when their communications systems failed during a Taliban ambush. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, Corporal Jennifer Walsh, and Private First Class David Rodriguez had died because their radios couldn't maintain contact with supporting units. The incident report from Kandahar province painted a devastating picture. The soldiers' unit had been conducting a routine patrol when they encountered enemy forces in a narrow valley. Their communications equipment failed repeatedly, preventing them from calling for air support or coordinating with nearby units. By the time rescue forces located them, all 3 were dead. Henderson Industries had received the casualty report through official Defense Department channels. Internal emails showed that CEO Henderson and CFO Cross were fully aware that their defective equipment had contributed to American deaths. Rather than immediately correcting the problems and notifying the Pentagon they had doubled down on their fraud, legal department memos revealed a calculated decision to suppress information about equipment failures. Corporate attorney David Park had advised executive leadership to minimize documentation of quality control issues and avoid any admissions of responsibility for military casualties. The company's upcoming bid for a $200 million Navy contract used the same defective technology that had already killed soldiers. Henderson was preparing to sell the Navy communications systems with known reliability problems, putting entire ship crews at risk during combat operations. My investigation also uncovered a bribery scheme involving Pentagon Procurement Officer Colonel Thomas Wright. Financial records showed regular payments to Wright's offshore accounts in exchange for favorable contract evaluations and expedited approval processes. The colonel had received over $600,000 in bribes from Henderson Industries over 3 years. Wright's influence within the Pentagon procurement system was substantial. His positive recommendations carried significant weight with contract review boards, allowing Henderson to secure lucrative deals despite their substandard performance history. The corruption extended throughout the military acquisition process. Agent Wells increased the frequency of our covert meetings as the evidence mounted. We met in different locations around the Washington metropolitan area, a bookstore in Georgetown, a coffee shop near Union Station, a public park in Alexandria. Each meeting followed careful protocols to avoid detection by Henderson's security personnel. The emotional toll of my investigation intensified as I learned more about the soldiers who had died. Staff Sergeant Chen had been planning to propose to his girlfriend after completing his deployment. Corporal Walsh was supporting her elderly parents and sending money home for her younger brother's college tuition. Private Rodriguez had just become a father and was carrying pictures of his newborn daughter. Henderson Industries was preparing to destroy potentially incriminating documents before an upcoming Defense Department audit. CFO Cross had ordered the systematic deletion of email archives and the physical destruction of paper files related to quality control testing. The company was actively obstructing justice while continuing to endanger military personnel. My race against time became increasingly desperate as I worked to copy critical files before they disappeared forever. Using portable storage devices disguised as USB charging cables, I extracted terabytes of data during late-night sessions in the company's document storage areas. The installation of keylogger software on executive computers allowed me to capture real-time communications between Henderson leadership and their co-conspirators. Email exchanges revealed additional defense contractors involved in similar fraud schemes, suggesting an industry-wide pattern of corruption. Henderson's plan to secure the Navy contract included falsifying test results for new equipment prototypes. Engineering teams were under orders to manipulate performance data and conceal negative findings from government evaluators. The company was preparing to commit the same crimes on an even larger scale. My cover remained intact, but the psychological strain was becoming unbearable. Every day spent maintaining friendly relationships with colleagues while documenting their employers' crimes felt like a profound betrayal of my own moral principles. The weight of knowing about past military deaths and potential future casualties was crushing. Henderson Industries' mounting paranoia about information leaks led them to hire Blackstone Security Services, a private investigation firm specializing in corporate espionage cases. The company's new security consultant was Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent with an intimidating reputation for uncovering insider threats. Webb arrived at Henderson with a team of investigators who immediately began conducting comprehensive background checks on all employees with access to sensitive financial data. Their methodology was thorough and professional, examining credit reports, employment histories, personal relationships, and digital footprints with forensic precision. The enhanced security measures created an atmosphere of suspicion throughout the company. Webb's team installed additional surveillance cameras in common areas, implemented new access controls for secure facilities, and began monitoring employee computer activities in real time. Every keystroke and mouse click was recorded and analyzed for suspicious patterns. My military intelligence background, which I had partially concealed during the original hiring process, became a liability under Webb's scrutiny. Corporate human resources records contained subtle inconsistencies that trained investigators could easily detect. My security clearance history and specialized technical training raised red flags for someone conducting a professional counterintelligence operation. Webb's investigation revealed gaps in my employment timeline that corresponded with classified military assignments I couldn't discuss publicly. The sophisticated cybersecurity skills I demonstrated on the job exceeded what would be expected from someone with my stated educational background. These discrepancies painted a picture of someone with hidden professional experience. The implementation of keystroke monitoring software forced me to completely revise my evidence-gathering methods. Every computer interaction was being recorded and analyzed by Webb's team, making it impossible to access restricted files through normal network channels. I had to develop new techniques for extracting information without triggering automated security alerts. Building relationships with Henderson's night shift maintenance crew provided alternative access to sensitive areas. These employees had master keys for cleaning offices and servicing equipment after regular business hours. By volunteering to work late on legitimate projects, I could coordinate my activities with their schedules and gain physical access to restricted locations. The custodial staff included Maria Santos, a hardworking single mother who cleaned the executive offices, and Robert Johnson, a retired veteran who maintained the computer server rooms. Both were honest, dedicated employees who unknowingly assisted my investigation by providing casual conversation about which offices were occupied late at night. Webb's background investigation also discovered a second fraud scheme involving kickbacks from Henderson's subcontractors. The company was receiving illegal payments from suppliers in exchange for inflated purchase orders and expedited payment processing. Millions of additional dollars were being stolen through this parallel corruption network. Infrastructure projects at Henderson's manufacturing facilities were systematically overcharged with construction costs inflated by as much as 200% above market rates. Subcontractors paid substantial bribes to secure these lucrative deals, passing the excess costs on to government contracts through indirect billing mechanisms. The web of corruption extended far beyond simple overcharging. Henderson Industries had become a criminal enterprise that operated with impunity because of their political connections and Pentagon relationships. The company's executives treated government contracts as personal enrichment opportunities rather than sacred obligations to support American military personnel. Webb's investigation team began focusing specifically on cybersecurity personnel after detecting unusual network traffic patterns during off-hours maintenance windows. My encrypted file transfers to DOJ handlers had been carefully disguised, but sophisticated traffic analysis tools could identify anomalous data flows that suggested unauthorized information extraction. Agent Wells warned me during a tense meeting in Rock Creek Park that Henderson's security consultants were closing in on my identity. The DOJ needed conclusive evidence within days before my cover was completely blown. The investigation had reached a critical juncture where decisive action was required to prevent the destruction of evidence and the continuation of crimes. The pressure from Webb's counterintelligence operation was matched by increasing demands from Henderson's executives for enhanced productivity and loyalty demonstrations. CFO Cross began requiring all financial department employees to attend mandatory team-building exercises designed to identify potential security risks through psychological profiling techniques. My relationship with IT Director James Thornton became strained as he noticed my unusual work patterns and stress levels. James was a perceptive manager who genuinely cared about his team members' well-being. His questions about my personal life and job satisfaction reflected legitimate concern, but created dangerous exposure for my cover story. Sarah Fletcher in the finance department also began expressing concern about my apparent distraction and occasional mood swings. Her friendly inquiries about my supposed divorce proceedings required increasingly elaborate fabrications that consumed mental energy I needed for the investigation. The discovery that Henderson was planning to destroy crucial documents before the upcoming Defense Department audit created a sense of urgency that bordered on desperation. Internal memos indicated that massive document destruction would begin within 72 hours, permanently eliminating evidence of the company's crimes. Webb's security team had identified me as their primary suspect for the information leaks. They lacked definitive proof, but were preparing to recommend my termination and potential prosecution for industrial espionage. The irony of being investigated for espionage while conducting a legitimate federal investigation was not lost on me. Henderson Industries' plan to secure the $200 million Navy contract remained on track despite the internal security investigation. The company's executives believed they could eliminate the leak problem and continue their criminal operations indefinitely. Their arrogance was matched only by their complete disregard for the military personnel whose lives depended on reliable equipment. The confrontation I had been anticipating for months finally arrived on a gray Tuesday morning in November. Marcus Webb presented his findings to Security Chief Bradley Morrison in a closed-door meeting that lasted over 2 hours. Webb's report identified me as the most likely source of Henderson Industries' security breaches based on my background inconsistencies and suspicious network activities. Morrison faced an agonizing dilemma that tested every principle he claimed to value. As a 23-year employee of Henderson Industries, he had built his career on loyalty to the company and protection of its interests. However, Webb's evidence suggested that a federal agent had infiltrated the organization, indicating serious criminal activity that would ultimately destroy everything he had worked to protect. My final evidence-gathering mission took place the previous weekend when I gained access to CEO Henderson's private office located on the 32nd floor of the corporate headquarters building. Using master keys obtained from the maintenance staff, I entered the executive suite during Saturday night cleaning operations when the building was nearly deserted. Henderson's personal safe hidden behind a false panel in his office bookshelf contained documents that would conclusively prove his knowledge of the equipment defects and military casualties. The combination lock required patience and technical skill, but my military training and covert operations had prepared me for exactly this type of challenge. Inside the safe were signed authorizations for the shipment of known defective communication equipment to military units in Afghanistan and Iraq. Henderson's personal signature appeared on quality control waivers that deliberately bypassed safety testing requirements. These documents proved beyond any doubt that he was personally responsible for the deaths of American soldiers. Letters from Pentagon officials expressing concern about equipment reliability were filed alongside Henderson's handwritten notes, dismissing the complaints as bureaucratic nitpicking and acceptable risk levels. The CEO's casual attitude toward military casualties revealed a level of moral bankruptcy that was difficult to comprehend. Morrison's private meeting with me on Monday morning caught me off guard, but provided an opportunity I hadn't expected. Rather than immediately reporting Webb's findings to company executives, Morrison chose to confront me directly and ask for an explanation. His decision reflected internal conflict between institutional loyalty and growing suspicion about Henderson's activities. The security chief's personal investment in the company made my revelation particularly devastating. Morrison had dedicated his entire adult life to protecting Henderson Industries, believing he was serving a patriotic organization that supported American military superiority. Learning about the equipment defects and soldier deaths shattered his fundamental worldview. My calculated decision to partially reveal my mission to Morrison was based on careful assessment of his character and motivations. During 18 months of observation, I had identified him as a man of integrity who would prioritize moral obligations over corporate loyalty when presented with clear evidence of wrongdoing. Morrison's reaction to seeing photographs of the falsified quality control documents was immediate and visceral. His face flushed with anger as he realized that Henderson executives had been lying to him about the company's compliance with government contracts. The betrayal he felt was evident in his clenched fists and trembling voice. The revelation that his own son, Marine Lance Corporal Bradley Morrison Jr., served with a unit that had received Henderson's defective communication equipment transformed the situation from abstract corporate crime to personal threat. Morrison's protective instincts as a father overwhelmed his professional obligations as a company security officer. Lance Corporal Morrison was deployed with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit in the Persian Gulf region conducting maritime security operations that required reliable communication with command structures and supporting units. If his radio equipment failed during combat operations, he could face the same fate as the soldiers who had died in Afghanistan. Morrison's transformation from company loyalist to reluctant federal ally occurred within minutes of learning about the military casualties. The photographs of Staff Sergeant Chen Corporal Walsh and Private Rodriguez reminded him that Henderson's crimes had real victims with faces, names, and families. The abstraction of corporate fraud became personal tragedy. Henderson Industries' executive team was preparing for what they believed would be a routine termination meeting to remove a problematic employee. CEO Henderson's CFO Cross and legal counsel Park had no idea that their fired cybersecurity analyst was actually a federal agent with extensive documentation of their criminal activities. My preparation of the Dead Man Switch protocol ensured that all evidence would be automatically transmitted to multiple DOJ offices and congressional oversight committees if I failed to check in with my handlers according to predetermined schedules. Henderson's executives could fire me, but they couldn't stop the federal investigation from moving forward. The tense dynamics in Henderson's corporate headquarters reflected the company's deteriorating security situation. Webb's investigation had identified a major leak, but couldn't definitively prove its source. Morrison held information that could resolve the mystery, but was wrestling with moral obligations that conflicted with his professional duties. My strategic decision to allow myself to be fired would trigger the dramatic revelation that would expose Henderson's crimes to federal prosecutors and the news media simultaneously. The termination meeting was carefully orchestrated to occur at the exact moment when FBI agents would be executing search warrants at multiple company locations. The irony of Henderson executives celebrating the removal of their biggest security threat while federal agents prepared to arrest them for the very crimes I had documented was deeply satisfying on a professional level. Justice was finally approaching for the soldiers who had died because of corporate greed and negligence. Morrison's internal struggle continued until the moment he held my employee badge and discovered the DOJ asset sticker that would change everything. His choice to protect my cover until that point demonstrated remarkable courage and integrity given the enormous professional and personal risks he was accepting. The termination meeting in Henderson Industries' executive conference room had the atmosphere of a corporate execution. CEO Richard Henderson sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his expensive suit and gold watch reflecting the wealth he had accumulated through years of systematic fraud. CFO Margaret Cross arranged financial documents with predatory precision, while legal counsel David Park reviewed termination paperwork with the satisfaction of someone destroying an enemy. Their smugness was palpable as they discussed my supposed security violations and insubordinate behavior. Henderson spoke about protecting company interests and maintaining operational security, never suspecting that their problematic employee had been documenting their crimes for the Department of Justice. Ms. Morrison has demonstrated a pattern of unauthorized access to sensitive systems, Cross announced, reading from a fabricated performance evaluation. Her continued employment poses an unacceptable risk to our government contracts and corporate reputation. Park nodded in agreement, adding legal justifications for immediate termination without severance benefits or positive references. Their casual cruelty reflected the same callous disregard for human welfare that had led them to ship defective equipment to military units. I maintained complete composure throughout their theatrical performance, knowing that FBI agents were already positioned around the building complex. Agent Wells had coordinated the timing precisely to ensure that my termination would occur simultaneously with the execution of federal search warrants. Henderson's self-righteous speech about corporate loyalty and patriotic duty was interrupted by the sound of vehicles arriving in the parking lot below. Black SUVs and unmarked sedans surrounded the corporate headquarters building as federal agents prepared to arrest the executives who were congratulating themselves on firing me. Morrison stood in the security office holding my employee badge, his face reflecting the emotional turmoil of someone whose entire worldview had been shattered in a matter of hours. The silver DOJ sticker on the badge's reverse side represented the culmination of an 18-month federal investigation that would destroy Henderson Industries and send its leadership to prison. The precise coordination of the FBI raid demonstrated the professionalism and thoroughness of Agent Wells's operation. Multiple teams simultaneously entered Henderson's manufacturing facilities in Virginia, accounting offices in Maryland, and executive homes throughout the Washington metropolitan area. No aspect of the criminal conspiracy would escape federal scrutiny. Agent Wells led the arrest team that burst through the conference room doors at exactly 10:37 in the morning. Her authoritative voice cut through the executives' shocked protestations as she announced their arrests for conspiracy fraud and violations of the Defense Production Act. CEO Henderson's face transformed from smug confidence to absolute terror as federal agents read him his Miranda rights. The wealthy executive who had treated government contracts as personal enrichment opportunities now faced the prospect of spending the rest of his life in federal prison. CFO Cross attempted to destroy documents by tearing up financial records, but surveillance cameras installed during my investigation captured every moment of her obstruction of justice. The evidence of her desperate attempt to conceal crimes would add additional charges to her already overwhelming legal problems. Legal counsel Park's participation in the cover-up had transformed him from attorney to co-conspirator in federal crimes. His knowledge of Henderson's criminal activities and active assistance in concealing evidence made him equally culpable under federal conspiracy statutes. The search warrants authorized agents to seize computer systems, financial records, and personal devices from all locations associated with Henderson Industries. Years of evidence were secured within hours, ensuring that no aspect of the criminal conspiracy could be hidden or destroyed. Morrison's decision to cooperate fully with federal authorities provided additional evidence that strengthened the prosecution's case. His detailed knowledge of company security procedures and executive communications helped agents locate crucial documents and electronic records. My professional satisfaction at watching justice unfold was tempered by sadness for the honest employees who would lose their jobs when Henderson Industries faced criminal penalties. James Thornton, Sarah Fletcher, and hundreds of other workers had no knowledge of the executive crimes, but would suffer consequences when the company collapsed. The revelation to arrested executives that their fired employee had actually been the architect of their downfall created a moment of perfect poetic justice. Henderson's attempt to eliminate a security threat had instead triggered the federal investigation that would destroy him. News crews arrived within hours as word of the arrest spread throughout the Washington metropolitan area. Henderson Industries' stock price collapsed as investors learned about the federal charges and the scope of the criminal investigation. The company's government contracts were immediately suspended, pending resolution of the legal proceedings. Morrison's transformation from corporate security chief to federal cooperating witness demonstrated the power of moral awakening when confronted with undeniable evidence of wrongdoing. His courage in choosing truth over institutional loyalty helped ensure that justice would be served for the soldiers who had died. The broader implications of Henderson's arrest extended far beyond a single defense contractor. The investigation had exposed systemic corruption within the military procurement process that would require comprehensive reforms to prevent future fraud and protect American service members. My transition back to official federal agent status felt like emerging from a long undercover assignment in hostile territory. 18 months of maintaining a false identity while documenting horrible crimes had taken an emotional toll that would require time and counseling to fully process. The immediate aftermath of the arrests created chaos throughout Henderson Industries as federal agents secured evidence and interviewed potential witnesses. The criminal organization that had operated with impunity for years was finally being held accountable for its crimes against the American military and taxpayers. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Alexandria became the center of national attention as the Henderson Industries conspiracy trial began. The prosecution team led by United States Attorney Amanda Torres had assembled overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud that had cost taxpayers $40 million and contributed to the deaths of American soldiers. I took the witness stand on a crisp morning in April, facing the defendants who had once held my professional fate in their hands. Henderson, Cross, and Park sat at the defense table with their expensive attorneys, their corporate arrogance replaced by the grim realization that federal prison awaited them. Defense attorney Robert Schlesinger launched an aggressive cross-examination designed to portray me as an overzealous federal agent who had entrapped innocent business executives into criminal behavior. His strategy focused on discrediting my methods and questioning the legitimacy of undercover operations in corporate settings. "Agent Morrison," Schlesinger began with theatrical indignation, "isn't it true that you deliberately deceived honest employees and manipulated corporate executives into actions they would never have taken without your influence?" My response was calm and factual, drawing on months of preparation with federal prosecutors. "Mr. Schlesinger, I documented crimes that were already occurring when I arrived at Henderson Industries. I never suggested, encouraged, or initiated any fraudulent activities. I simply observed and recorded ongoing criminal behavior." Schlesinger's entrapment argument collapsed under the weight of documentary evidence showing that Henderson's fraud had been occurring for years before my arrival. Internal company records proved that the systematic overcharging and equipment defects were established practices rather than responses to federal investigation. Prosecutor Torres presented financial evidence with devastating precision, showing how Henderson Industries had stolen $40 million through falsified invoices, inflated contract specifications, and kickback schemes with subcontractors. Each fraudulent transaction was meticulously documented with bank records, email communications, and internal corporate memos. The emotional high point of my testimony came when I described the 3 soldiers who had died in Afghanistan due to Henderson's defective communication equipment. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, Corporal Jennifer Walsh, and Private First Class David Rodriguez were not abstract statistics, but real people whose families deserved justice. These men and women trusted that their equipment would work when their lives depended on it. I testified, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. Henderson Industries betrayed that trust for profit, and American soldiers paid the ultimate price for corporate greed. Henderson's defense team attempted to shift blame to lower-level employees and claim ignorance of quality control problems, but internal documents proved that executive leadership had full knowledge of equipment defects and chose to conceal them from government officials. The surprise appearance of Colonel Thomas Wright as a prosecution witness rather than a co-defendant shocked the courtroom and defense attorneys. Wright's cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors had been kept secret until his testimony revealed the broader scope of Pentagon corruption. Wright's admission that he had received $2 million in bribes from 12 different defense contractors transformed the Henderson case into a window into systemic military procurement fraud. His detailed testimony about accepting payments in exchange for favorable contract evaluations exposed corruption throughout the Defense Department acquisition process. Henderson Industries was just one of many companies that paid me to influence contract decisions. Wright testified his military bearing diminished by the shame of his confessions. The entire system was corrupted by contractors who treated Pentagon officials as commodities to be purchased. The revelation of Wright's extensive bribery scheme sent shockwaves through the defense contractor community and prompted immediate congressional investigations into military procurement practices. Henderson's crimes were part of a much larger pattern of corruption that threatened national security. Henderson's complete emotional breakdown during Wright's testimony demonstrated the psychological impact of watching his carefully constructed criminal empire collapse in federal court. The wealthy executive who had treated government contracts as personal enrichment opportunities now faced the reality of spending decades in prison. Cross's last-minute attempt to negotiate a plea agreement by offering testimony against other co-conspirators came too late to significantly reduce her legal exposure. Federal prosecutors had already assembled overwhelming evidence of her central role in the conspiracy and saw no need to offer substantial sentencing concessions. Judge Elizabeth Hartwell's stern remarks during the sentencing phase reflected judicial outrage at corporate executives who had endangered military personnel for financial gain. Her comments about the sacred trust between defense contractors and American service members resonated throughout the courtroom. The defendants in this case betrayed not only the taxpayers who funded their contracts, but the soldiers whose lives depended on reliable equipment, Judge Hartwell declared. Corporate executives who profit from military contracts while knowingly endangering American service members deserve the full weight of federal justice. Media coverage of the trial highlighted my heroic undercover work and the lives saved by exposing Henderson's criminal conspiracy. News reports emphasized that my investigation had prevented future military casualties by stopping the shipment of additional defective equipment to combat zones. The broader impact on defense industry reform became apparent as congressional committees announced comprehensive reviews of military procurement procedures and enhanced oversight of contractor performance. Henderson's prosecution would serve as a warning to other companies tempted to defraud the government. Cross-examination of Henderson executives revealed the depth of their moral bankruptcy and casual disregard for military welfare. Their recorded conversations dismissing soldier deaths as acceptable losses and cost of doing business demonstrated criminal negligence that went beyond simple financial fraud. The prosecution's presentation of evidence created a compelling narrative of corporate crime that resonated with jurors and court observers. Henderson Industries had evolved from a legitimate defense contractor into a criminal enterprise that systematically stole taxpayer money while endangering American military personnel. Defense attorneys' attempts to minimize the significance of equipment failures were undermined by expert testimony from military communications specialists who explained how radio malfunctions had directly contributed to the deaths of soldiers in Afghanistan. The jury's guilty verdicts on all counts reflected their understanding of the serious crimes committed by Henderson's leadership. The evidence had been overwhelming, and the defendants' attempts to shift responsibility had failed completely in the face of documentary proof of their guilt. The sentencing hearing 3 months later brought final justice for the crimes that had cost American lives and taxpayer dollars. Judge Hartwell's decisions reflected the severity of Henderson Industries' betrayal of public trust and military personnel who depended on reliable equipment. CEO Richard Henderson received 25 years in federal prison and a $50 million fine that would strip him of the wealth he had accumulated through criminal activities. His sentence sent a clear message that corporate executives who endanger military personnel would face the full consequences of federal justice. CFO Margaret Cross was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison and received a permanent ban from serving in corporate leadership positions. Her central role in concealing equipment defects and falsifying financial records had made her equally culpable for the deaths of American soldiers. Legal counsel David Park received 12 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. His participation in covering up Henderson's crimes had violated the fundamental ethical obligations of the legal profession and contributed to the ongoing endangerment of military personnel. Colonel Thomas Wright's cooperation with federal prosecutors earned him a reduced sentence of 8 years in federal prison, but his military career ended with a dishonorable discharge that stripped him of pension benefits and veterans' privileges. His corruption had betrayed every principle of military honor and service. Henderson Industries faced criminal organization charges under federal racketeering statutes, resulting in massive financial penalties and permanent federal oversight of any remaining business operations. The company's assets were seized to pay restitution to the families of deceased soldiers and reimburse taxpayers for fraudulent billing. Morrison's transformation from corporate security chief to federal whistleblower advocate represented the most remarkable personal redemption in the entire case. He left Henderson Industries to establish a nonprofit organization that helps defense contractor employees report fraud and safety violations without fear of retaliation. His congressional testimony led to the passage of enhanced whistleblower protection laws for defense industry employees. Morrison's courage in choosing moral principles over corporate loyalty had created lasting reforms that would protect future military personnel from corporate negligence. My recognition with Distinguished Service Awards from both the Department of Justice and Department of Defense reflected the significance of my undercover work in exposing systematic fraud. The investigation had prevented countless military casualties by stopping Henderson's continued shipment of defective equipment to combat zones. My promotion to senior special agent included assignment to the DOJ's newly created Corporate Crimes Against Military Personnel Unit, where I would train other agents in undercover investigation techniques and oversee future cases involving defense contractor fraud. Congressional hearings on defense contractor oversight resulted in comprehensive legislative reforms that strengthened government oversight of military procurement. The Henderson Industries case became a textbook example of how corporate greed could undermine national security and endanger American service members. Implementation of enhanced verification systems for military equipment. Quality control ensured that future testing would be conducted by independent laboratories rather than contractor-controlled facilities. These reforms would prevent companies from falsifying performance data and concealing equipment defects. Creation of anonymous reporting systems allowed defense industry employees to report safety violations and fraud without fear of retaliation from corporate management. Morrison's advocacy organization provided legal support and protection for workers who witnessed criminal activities in defense contracting. The establishment of a victim compensation fund provided financial support for military families affected by defective equipment. The families of Staff Sergeant Chen Corporal Walsh and Private Rodriguez received substantial compensation, though no amount of money could restore their lost loved ones. My understanding of justice had evolved through the investigation to recognize that true accountability required more than simply punishing individual criminals. Systematic reforms were necessary to prevent future corruption and protect the military personnel who depended on reliable equipment. The recognition that corruption could only be stopped by individuals willing to risk everything for truth had become a guiding principle in my career. Morrison's transformation from corporate loyalist to moral advocate demonstrated that redemption was possible even for those who had initially chosen institutional loyalty over ethical principles. The balance between personal relationships and professional duty remained a complex challenge that required careful consideration in every undercover assignment. My genuine friendships with honest Henderson employees had made the investigation emotionally difficult, but had also humanized the consequences of corporate crime. The satisfaction of knowing that my work had prevented future military casualties provided deep personal fulfillment that transcended professional recognition. Every communication device that would now function properly in combat zones represented American lives that would be protected from corporate negligence. Morrison's continued advocacy for defense industry reform ensured that the lessons of Henderson Industries would not be forgotten. His nonprofit organization had helped expose fraud at 6 other defense contractors within 2 years of its establishment, saving taxpayers millions of dollars and protecting military personnel. My new role training other undercover agents allowed me to pass on the lessons learned from the Henderson case to future investigators. The techniques developed during my 18-month assignment became standard procedures for corporate fraud investigations throughout the federal law enforcement community. The peaceful resolution that came from seeing systematic changes implemented to protect military personnel provided emotional closure for the difficult undercover assignment. Justice had been served not only through punishment of criminals, but through prevention of future crimes. My visit to Arlington National Cemetery to honor the soldiers who had died due to defective equipment became an annual tradition that reminded me of the human cost of corporate crime. Staff Sergeant Chen Corporal Walsh and Private Rodriguez had not died in vain if their sacrifice led to reforms that protected other service members. Meeting with their families to explain how my investigation had ensured accountability for their loved ones' deaths was one of the most meaningful experiences of my career. Their gratitude and support provided emotional strength that sustained me through the challenges of subsequent investigations. The deep satisfaction of seeing Henderson's executives face justice was matched by the knowledge that systematic reforms would prevent similar tragedies in the future. Corporate crime that endangers human lives demands unwavering response from those with the power and authority to act. Individual courage and integrity can overcome institutional corruption when supported by systematic investigation and prosecution. Morrison's moral awakening and my undercover work had demonstrated that ordinary people could hold powerful organizations accountable for their actions. The responsibility of citizens to demand accountability from organizations that profit from government contracts extends beyond law enforcement to every American who values military welfare and fiscal responsibility. Corporate executives who betray public trust must face consequences that deter future crimes. True victory in cases like Henderson Industries comes not just from punishment of wrongdoers, but from prevention of future harm through systematic reform. The lives saved by enhanced oversight and quality control measures would be the lasting legacy of our investigation. The transformation of Morrison from corporate loyalist to ethical advocate proved that redemption was possible even for those who initially chose institutional loyalty over moral principles. His courage in confronting uncomfortable truths about his employer had prevented additional military casualties and inspired congressional reforms. The understanding that justice requires personal sacrifice and moral courage had become the foundation of my approach to federal law enforcement. Fighting corruption and protecting innocent lives sometimes demanded difficult choices that tested personal relationships and professional obligations. The peaceful knowledge that our work had prevented future tragedies provided the emotional satisfaction that made the personal costs of undercover investigation worthwhile. American service members would return safely to their families because corporate criminals could no longer endanger them with defective equipment. The systematic changes implemented throughout the defense industry ensured that Henderson Industries' crimes would serve as a warning to other companies tempted to prioritize profit over military welfare. Enhanced oversight and whistleblower protections would continue protecting American service members long after the specific criminals had been imprisoned. What would you do if you discovered that your employer was deliberately endangering the lives of American military personnel for profit? Would you have the courage to risk your career and personal safety to expose corporate crimes that threaten national security? Please share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like this video if you believe in holding powerful corporations accountable for their actions. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about ordinary people fighting extraordinary corruption, and share this video with anyone who supports our military and believes in justice. Thank you for joining me on this journey of corporate accountability and military justice. May we always remember that standing up for truth requires courage, but protecting those who serve our country is worth any personal sacrifice we might face.